Hello and welcome to this weekend edition of Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. The Rio de Janeiro Olympic Games have now been going for just over a week of highs and lows. In China, the somewhat naive reactions of 20-year-old Fu Yuanhui after winning bronze in the women's 100 meters endeared her to her countrymen. Overseas audiences may find it very difficult to understand why there has been festive jubilation about this event. Is it a huge step in the correct direction about discipline of Chinese athletes and state sponsorship? On other fronts of the intensive media coverage, there have been almost daily reports about the ongoing doping scandals in the Rio Games. So is this a new turning point for the Olympic movement? Today I'm joined here by Dong Jun and Duan Yanling. But before we start the interview, let's look at this.
Rio Olympics has made Fu Yuanhui a great hit on China's social media. The 20-year-old swimmer earned a bronze in the women's 100 meters. In her post-race interview with CCTV, she said she unleashed prehistorical powers. Fu's boisterous reaction and comment went viral on the internet. Chinese netizens generated plenty of memes to show their support. Also shining both in the pool and on Chinese social media is gold medalist Sun Yang. Sun earned the only swimming gold for China in Rio with a close win in the men's 200-meter freestyle finals. He also earned a silver in the men's 400-meter freestyle finals, beaten by Australian gold medalist Mac Horton by only 0.13 seconds. Horton had earlier called Sun Yang a drug cheat, referring to Sun's serving a 3-month suspension for taking a banned heart medication. The remarks drew widespread criticism in China. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that Horton acknowledged it was a deliberate ploy to get into the head of his main rival. China's Swimming Association issued a formal email asking Horton to issue an apology. In the wake of this war of words, the International Olympic Committee has urged athletes to show respect for one another.
Clearly, we want to encourage freedom of speech, but on the other hand, of course, the Olympics is and should be about respecting others and respecting the right of others to compete. And we would, there is a line that somewhere there where, and each case is different, where people should be free to compete in tranquility, if you like, and not being aggressed by others. So yes, we would encourage people to respect their fellow competitors.
The IOC banned Russian track and field athletes from the Rio Games after the McLaren report said that the Russian state and its security services had manipulated the doping control process. Furthermore, the International Paralympic Committee issued a blanket ban on Russian Paralympians. Russia's Paralympic Committee is appealing the decision, saying it is politicized and a grave human rights abuse.
Welcome back to our studio discussion here. There are highs and lows over the past week about the performance of athletes from different countries in the Rio Games. For you personally, Yanling, what is the most newsworthy event that has caused huge interest and perhaps a festive jubilation on the social media in China in particular?
I think besides the opening ceremony, this has to be Fu. Fu has been such a sensation, overswiping everywhere, so you cannot expect it. I think she's real, like, overnight stars.
She's indeed a social media sensation. What do you think of the strong repercussions that her performances in front of the media, the CCTV camera, has caused?
Well, CCTV, in particular the female journalist, reporter on the spot, because CCTV had that exclusive right to interview her in the mixed zone, but CCTV also contributed to the so-called competing online media something really rare and quickly identified as something that they didn't expect. It's such a surprise gift for online media who are chasing for something really dramatic, because Fu, behind her, there was no personal corporate sponsorship, and nobody actually anticipated or expected her to produce anything newsworthy or sensation online. But she just came up with something that that's really rewarding than some of the other bigger stars.
In the exclusive interview that the CCTV Sports did this morning, Fu Yuanhui said she had not expected this to have happened in front of the media, on the social media. she had consistently displayed a true character that is unpretentious throughout the whole event. What do you think of the dramatic moment that she shared with millions of netizens?
I think even everyone that was under camera, we all know that the pressure, but I love that the fact that she could be so genuine and cheerful without considering that who's watching, but just to portray a real her surprising expressions. That has been a real iconic.
She was not apologetic at all for
Not at all.
her for being true to her character. Now, many scholars used this event to analyze what went wrong with the state sponsorship in terms perhaps of the highly disciplined performance of Chinese athletes in front of the cameras right after they finished the competition, either in the track and field or in the pool. Are you surprised that this time around people, whatever their ages, whatever their professions, reacted overwhelmingly positive?
Well, I think for number one, I think the overwhelming majority, or those who decide the opinion trend online, are getting younger and younger. And you have to see how those born after 1990s actually react to what their peers reacted on what they commented on the news media. And I read an interesting article by a Peking University scholar, Professor Jiang, analyzing that these 1990s younger generation, actually they are behaving very differently from the older generations, even the 1980s. And if you go to the story of this personal or family story of Fu, and even her father didn't take the Rio Olympics that seriously. So before she departed China, the father asked her, "Are you serious you are going? We don't need you to be that famous or to win any glory or money for us. You just feel you really like it." And she said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go. I really want to experience this." And this is very completely different from many other Olympic glory stories that Chinese athletes have told us over the years.
Yeah, it's another kind of a graceful behavior, saying not to think.
And Fu Yuanhui went ahead with 1 hour live on the internet, and she made as much as 100,000 RMB after taxes were deducted. Now, she said she would not be a hit on the social media. She would prefer to go back to her profession as a real sportswoman. What do you think of this display of her true character?
I guess it's display virtue, displays intelligence, display strength, 德智体美, right? So she really displayed like very wholly complete personality. And I also, one thing I thought, I didn't mean to interrupt. So I thought that her kind of really carefree, didn't thank your motherland, as we all mentioned, always take this honor under your shoulder. This carefree personality really kicking in the 90s generation, and especially with this cheerful personality, really a darling of the. And most important is Hong Huang Zhili. I thought we've been discussing 1,000 times every day through media. I'm already tired of it, but the capacity of creating a keyword, searchable keyword on internet is also basic capacity for Wang Hong, right? Internet bloggers. So I think she's really qualified as a Wang Hong, but she's not interested. She's gonna kick on.
A bronze winner, she presents a new face and new expressions. And the Hong Huang Zhili became popular overnight on the social media. We have different versions about the translation. Some would translate it into pre-module force of the universe, or force of the primitive universe, whatever. She has exhausted what she could, right, to win the bronze. Now, this morning I was following the sports channel about the latest development in Rio de Janeiro, and one touching story was a runner, I forgot her nationality, kept running despite losing one of her shoes in the track and field. She thought, and she was very sad, she was crying at the finishing line. She thought she would never be able to join the final. But surprisingly, she was allowed to make her way to the final because she lost her shoes. And the disturbance had been taken into consideration by the judges and by those spectators. What do you make of the sense of being fair to athletes and the sense of leveling the playing field?
Well, I think, for me, as someone who has covered the Olympics for many editions, I would interpret that because the IOC or the Olympic movement would always look for something outside of sports to attract audience who do not follow sports or Olympic sports that closely. You need something, more humane, more dramatic, more interesting for people to talk about as a topic outside of the Michael Phelps or the other gold medal winners. So this is another typical example, and that's newsworthy, and that's something that can catch headlines outside of sports itself. That's something the Olympic movement will always try to create, such as the Olympic truce every time jointly announced with the United Nations. You have to prove this not only represent higher, stronger, and faster. This represents the efforts of making progress for human society.
But how about it stirs empathy, compassion, warmth, and this whole genuine, commonly shared humanity. Like humans feeling, emotions always good. I don't think it's a big sale. I think it just very generally stir.
In fact, I was impressed by what the spokesperson of the IOC said in Rio de Janeiro about the spat between Horton and Sun Yang. There are three universal values concerning the behavior of the players. One is, of course, excellence. The other two being friendship and respect. This spokesperson said, yes, we respect the freedom of speech. However, we also encourage respect for your rivals and the underdog in the competition. What do you think of the strong repercussions from the Chinese netizens towards what Horton said?
I don't think that as a Chinese audience will doesn't feel a little bit disturbed by not only the word he particularly used, but also right after you already lost the game. I don't think that you didn't show the grades that you expected from world-class athletes would show. So of course this sense of the disappointment also there, besides being nationalistically sensitive about that behavior.
So
yeah, I think before and after the Olympics there are still heated debate, or sometimes getting out of control, the argument or altercation between the Chinese netizens and some Westerners. Of course, the Chinese would significantly outnumber their competitors outside of China. But I think that's just represent how fast the internet is delivering messages and create the facilities and conveniences for people to debate and argue about something. And this time, in this particular case, I think Sun Yang, just with his tears, after finishing only second to Horton, his tears when he was burying his head in the journalist's arms, won him so much popularity back home, and then quickly they threw their support for him. So whatever being said against him, they would try to fight back.
Is that an issue of nationalism or mimic warfare?
I guess you always bring back to the political issues. You probably have much deeper insights on that.
There are some irrational comments, absolutely. But I think now that because of the Russian scandal, now that the doping issue is such a serious issue and it takes very serious investigation, not only by WADA, but by some other arbitration bodies or legal systems to look into, I think athletes should be regulated, should be reminded to be cautious when they make comments that are irresponsible or based on no scientific investigation.
This is a weekend edition of Dialogue. We first talked about the behavior of Fu Yuanhui, an immediate hit on the internet in front of the camera, and why her popular wording of primordial force of the universe caused so much discussion. When we come back, we'll also take a closer look at the doping scandal that's still besetting the Rio de Janeiro Olympic Games. We'll be back. Stay with us. What do you think of the mimic warfare techniques employed by Horton to stimulate the anger of his rival Sun Yang, so that he could probably lose in the men's 1,500 meters freestyle competition, and of course out of the final? What do you think of the alleged techniques used by Horton to anger his rival?
I'm not sure about this, this report about, later that he explained that he just used it as a technique to thwart Sun Yang's potential to beat him in the pool. But I think by reading deeper into that story, I think what he said or his sentiment against Sun Yang actually reflected the entire team's attitude toward Chinese swimmers, because he had no idea how Sun Yang developed his career or his swimming talent into good competitional marks. But he said he based his knowledge on some remarks from the leader of the Australian swimming team. So I think that's why I'm not so surprised the entire team, the Olympic Committee of Australia, or even the overwhelming majority of Australian media were behind him, because that represents not only the sentiment from Horton himself, but a great number of people who are not so fanatic about Chinese swimming. And I think this issue also reflects, based on the recent conversation I had with some American friends on this issue, that also it does reflect some cultural differences, because Westerners would argue about the word integrity. Integrity not only means that you need to be honest about yourself, but you also need to be honest about your attitude or your opinion about others, and you should freely express how do you think, or at least you may choose to be modest or to be indirect, but once you are direct, you shouldn't be too ashamed of yourself. But that's not acceptable in Chinese or traditional Chinese culture.
Perhaps we all have a sense that part of the Western culture is deeply embedded in their history of civilization is a sense of humility, and the way you treat others can be described whether it's gentlemanlike or ungentlemanlike. Having said this, what do you think of this part of Western culture? Once you have made a serious mistake, you would carry this track record all your life, and that will do a disservice to your reputation. However, in the case of Sun Yang, his reputation has been cleared after the 3-month ban, and yet he is still described by Horton and perhaps most of the media players in Australia as a drug cheat.
I guess as a world-class athlete, no matter you are on the camera, off the camera, but when you're doing Olympics, you are writing history. Mm-hmm. So I guess
you make history.
You are making history, and you wrote that history. Good. So there's some record you really can never wipe out, right? So you left that mark. It's not unnecessary. I mean, it's not understandable that people will remember that and take that as reference. However, integrity part and being honest about your opinion, I think there's a huge difference between being respectful for the fact or calling somebody's name just after the result came out, and that's just really bad mouthing someone than rather experience of like just say I disrespect you because your track record, not for this risk because you have no idea. So I think that's big differences between that. We call that integrity. I would really just call being a bad loser.
Well,
sorry.
Sun Yang might be an icon in the pool for the Chinese in their millions. But the universal symbol of an iconic image, I'm afraid, is Michael Phelps. He is in his early 30s, and perhaps this Olympic Games is his last. But he goes down history as a true hero. Now, what do you think of the spirit that he displayed?
Well, he also a comeback kid. He over the last 4 to 5 editions of Olympics, he participated from as a teenager. Between the Olympics, he also had some problems. He experienced some problems back home in the U.S., and including health problems and also habitual problems. But he's such a great example to be touted and advocated by the Olympic movement, to be someone who's also true, who also works hard, who also knows how to fight back. And that's really incredible. That's something that unprecedented in the Olympic history, but very hard to find a repeat in the future in many decades.
Your point in the analysis is very interesting. The history, personal or national alike, should be a learning curve for us to grow up together, to be mature together. And what he implied was that Michael Phelps also made mistakes when he was young. He grew up and he became a model and a hero for all those who loved him and the brilliant performances he achieved. So what lessons China should learn also from, for example, the doping scandal of Russia? The country lost all chance in the track and field this time around. Yan-Ling?
I think there is so much to talk about systematic doping. Certain countries, especially when looking at our history, and China has been speculated for a long time. I think from personal, just as a sports fan or Olympic fan, I think everyone just want to see some nobility, some grace, some real fairness, because this is what the sports or Olympic stands for. So I guess before winning is all, maybe that time has passed. Like the example you mentioned, like we want to give the person more opportunity to show their strengths or so much more than just winning that final goal. So we do remember the medals, but I also remember stories. So Miss Fu is a good example.
Yeah, it's a very good example and a case in point. So what do you think of the overwhelming attention on gold tally? It's as if we are paranoid, we are obsessively concerned with how many gold medals we have achieved. That reminds me, that takes me back to what happened to me personally in the year 2000 when I was covering the Sydney Olympic Games. At the party to celebrate China's huge success, I was very triumphant and happy asking Aussie a question. What do you think of a wonderful performance? And he said, it's no big deal. Look at the per capita achievement of the Australians, right? You guys have a sizable population of 1.3 billion. No big deal, right? Ray? So what do you think of his response? Our concession, I'm sorry, our overwhelming concern about the gold medal.
I think this varies from one country to another. For the biggest populated countries, in like China and India, I think the IOC would look to such new markets or new countries newly participating in the Olympic movement to really take the Olympic sports or the medal tally more seriously, because that would really push or boost the entire nation's morale or interest in developing modern Western creative sports. And I think, although yes, indeed, Chinese government and to the sports system and to the entire population have been so obsessed about winning medals over the last few decades. But now a significant change in the trend is that people have never been less obsessed about winning gold medals, about winning medals this time around than before. And now it's up to the IOC or the Olympic family to push the Brazilians or the Indians to be somewhat like China several decades ago, to take the Olympic sports more seriously. And I think that reflect the social progress or the very natural or logical development here in this country. People are taking personalities even more seriously than medals. Don't forget that Fu is only a bronze medal winner. And she didn't need to win that bronze medal to be popular, because she caused the sensation before winning the medal, after she made it into the final.
But can I just add like two more highlights for the Olympics? I think besides this, what you mentioned, not only in China, I think it's more like a global involvement. Did you see this refugee team? Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the
10 of them working under the Olympic flag.
Yeah, that was moments I really got, oh my God, it's really almost tears in my eyes. The other, that's Austin Holmes, that installations. He really want to present this, coming from the source, sharing energy like a sun. So I think there's so many moments that's beyond the sports. That's what
for me,
Olympics
a touching
amazing.
moment was when two Korean girls taking selfie together. One is from South Korea, the other the PRK, and that displayed the sense of unity. That's something in their blood, right? Yeah. Now, when do you think? 50 years from now, maybe it's too long. Do you think we'll be able to return to the charm of sports itself instead of counting the gold medals and taking honor of the sports achievement so seriously? You just enjoy the charm of sports and the spirit of sportsmanship itself instead of fixing your eyes on the screen, counting the gold medals all the time. I mean, this is indeed like what we had before in China.
I don't think the IOC or the Olympic Games can stand alone, without taking into account what the outside environment is like, because I can't anticipate what the world will be like in 50 years. I think maybe by that time, if it's still a peaceful world, I think some nations will definitely need the gold, the gold tally or the harvest of medals to boost their own national pride or morale. When maybe countries like China do not need that anymore, but some other countries may need. And this time around, I do find that not necessarily in the U.S., but in Great Britain, the obsession about medals, about gold-winning medals, is actually stronger than we thought.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's why they laughed at you.
Olympic spirit does cover stronger, faster, and higher. Also, friendship, excellence, and respect. But what about the development of high technology to completely eliminate any possibility of doping in the future?
I heard that even caffeine is considered to be possibly to be listed as a dangerous drug. So I think this standard of doping, like drugs, has been very confusing for people not scientifically knowledgeable about that. But I think it really need to come back to, from my point of view, I still think about a human. I think the game, Olympic is still a game. Game, you need to have a rule to be fair, to make the game even fun or even sustain. But I think my yoga teacher said once, it was really interesting. Well, the real spirit of sports or challenges to not to win who's competing with you, but to win over your former self. I think that spirit should always stay with the Olympic as well. Just from a personal point of view, maybe doping will disappear from that.
Very quickly, Dongjun, do you think the severe punishment against Russian delegation would be a wake-up call for all of the players, and therefore we're going to have a clean game next time?
I do believe so. Yes, I agree. I think all other nations are taking this very seriously, including China. You shouldn't, you should have zero tolerance for any, coaches or athletes pursuing the so-called excellence in competitions by violating the rules, by damaging or hurting the image of your nation.
Thank you very much. With that, we come to the end of this weekend edition of Dialogue. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.